Welcome, Sex Reimagined here, Leah Piper and the
Dr. Willow Brown.
beautiful Dr. Willow Brown. Today we have for you an enlightening episode all about what is spiritual sex.
And what can you do with it?
Yeah, we go over a lot of really juicy pieces. We talk about some of our own experiences growing up in a religious household and what we needed to transcend in order to bring sex into, or actually to bring spirituality into our sex lives.
Yeah, and the journeys that we both have been through are same but different, very unique. And you'll probably will relate to both of them, and you'll be like, "Oh, I had a little bit of this, a little bit of that." So, you might want to take some notes on this too. We talk about, the different aspects, the different pieces that make up a spiritual sexual encounter with somebody.
Yeah, we talk about what you can do to create a more spiritual experience in lovemaking. And that includes everything from creating a prayer, an invocation, a intention. So you're going to have a lot of things to draw on that will relate to your value system. We talk about trust and vulnerability, and why stillness and slowness are so powerful in experiencing more of a mystical experience.
Absolutely. You are going to love this episode. You're going to get so much out of it. And we cannot wait to hear what questions or what comments you have after you listen to this. So be sure to let us know.
Yeah, we want to know about your sacred sex experiences. So please don't hold back on us. You know better.
That's right.
Welcome to the Sex Reimagined podcast, where sex is shame-free and pleasure-forward. Let's get into the show.
Well. What is spiritual sex?
Well. I don't know. Let's talk about what that is.
Talk about it.
Spiritual sex. Oh, there's so many different kinds of sex to be had really in the world. I'd have to say spiritual sex is probably my most favorite because it touches a deeper part of me as a human being.
Yeah.
Not just as a woman. I don't know if it's women who crave this more or just people who are seekers. I'm not sure, but it does seem that it's much more satisfactory to all who are involved when there is a spiritual connection and you're using that sexual vitality, that sexual energy to create a higher level of consciousness.
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of reasons why people crave that deeper, more spiritual, kind of heartfelt, connected intimacy. I think we all sometimes come from different lenses as to how we get there. For me personally, I had a lot of spiritual and religious confusion growing up as a kid. So started off in a Pentecostal conservative family. My parents were kind of like hippies that went to Jesus. I think they did too many drugs and then got scared and then started having a family, and we thought, oh shit, we better get our shit together. So they found God. They were hippies for Jesus, baby. And they were young. They were in their early 20s when they started having kids and finding God. And it was a really deeply impactful time in their life. But with that indoctrination of such a conservative view into religion, man, did it come with a lot of guilt, fear, and shame.
Oh my God. Raise your hand if you are recovering Christian or Catholic, especially in the sexuality realm. I mean, and maybe you're still into those religions, and God bless. There's nothing that's great.
Yeah.
But if you're recovering from that in a sexual perspective, in a relationship way, so that you're not carrying all the shame and the guilt that comes with those particular religions and many other religions as well. It seems to me that the reason, and not to go too far down the religion rabbit hole, but it seems to me that a lot of the reason why religions have squashed or made sex to be like keep it down under is because it's so damn powerful. Like it's such a powerful force that we all have access to. And if we know how to utilize that power, I mean, we can do anything in the world. Nothing can stop us. It's really an incredible, it's the magic of life, in my opinion, my not so humble opinion. And, when it's stuck under the shame and under the guilt and under all of the suppressive things that not only religion, but society at large puts on top of it, we lose that magical part of ourselves.
It's interesting you use the word magical because that was a bad word growing up in my family. We weren't allowed to watch the Smurfs because,
yes,
there's all those magical qualities. Like magic was really sinful.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And then, to add more confusion to the soup, my parents left that church when I was 10 or 11. And I was really upset. I was kind of borderline suicidal because I loved that church. It was a huge sense of community. There was such of singing. I knew everyone in the neighborhood. It was like a big deal to me. That felt like my family. I didn't understand why we were leaving, but they left, I think, because they were noticing some corrupt mishandling of money. And that's a long story. We'll do a whole episode on the religious recovery as it relates to sexuality. But the reason why it's important for me in my story is because I did grow up feeling very close to the teachings of what God was. I remember my mom where I was in the bathtub one night, and it was like having my own little baptism with my mom. And do you accept Jesus Christ into your heart? It was like this whole thing. And, take away the words and the language in Jesus. I really felt like what I was saying at 5 years old, the memory is so crystal clear, is I believe in something. I believe in something bigger and more powerful than me. And the sense of peace and joy was I really felt it. It was in me. I think as confusing and as much as that particular time in my life fucked me up sexually, the gift it gave me was a sense of spirituality, was an autonomous and sovereign relationship between me and spirit, that it was individual and it was personal, and I didn't need anyone else to have that relationship. My mom instilled that truth into my being that night and then nurtured it on and on and on. And so it was why this idea of how can that be separate from sex?
Right.
How can this urge that I feel in my body, I'm so horny. How could that be separate from God? It wasn't congruent. It didn't make sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can absolutely relate to that. I had the opposite experience where I growing up and going to Catholic church every single Sunday and doing all the catechism and all that stuff. I just, in my mind and heart, I was like, this is some bullshit that is not for me. God bless if it's for someone else, but for me, it's not my path, and it's not something that I'm going to carry on when I get to make my own choices in the world. But I also was grateful that that I grew up later on. I was grateful that I did have that in my life, because it did give me this sense of spirituality, this sense of, okay, I'm not alone on this path. I've got spirit behind me. I've got this Tao is what I call it now. I've got this universal connection supporting me that I can align with, that I can find my state of congruence with, and it will support whatever I am desiring or calling forth into my life in its own unique way, of course. When sexuality came online for me, fortunately, my mom is a nurse. And so she was more like, okay, you're starting to have your period. You're starting to have these urges. All right. And she'd bust out the anatomy book, so that's probably what took me down the practitioner track, was just early on, looking at this stuff from a scientific physiological point of view as well. But it wasn't super shamed. It was just almost kind of more not talked about. So.
Yeah, mine was totally shamed. I think my mom has 4 daughters. And I just remember her saying, like, if I can just get through all of you through high school without getting pregnant, you can just don't do it. It's not worth it. Trust me.
Spread your legs.
It's not even that fun. And my dad is looking at her going, Kate, how can you say it's not fun? So I'm watching these 2 mixed messages, and I'm also feeling what I'm feeling in my body. And I was alive. I mean, I remember being very tingly and alive since a toddler. I mean, it doesn't just wake up in you when you're 13 and you get your period. We are sexually alive from the moment we're born. And we've all this fear about somebody underage feeling any of that. And that just contributes to the fear and the feeling of danger. And we've got to protect, especially our daughters. And it's just like, it was so overwhelming, this like virginal protection, like non-permissive, go have a great time, be sexually all that you can be. I mean, I would have loved that message. I would have loved somebody saying, here's all the ways you can have sex without getting pregnant. You know,
what a gift that would be.
I know. If what you're worried about is me getting pregnant, got it, get it. Totally understandable.
Yeah.
Then
that's
tell me all the other cool ass shit I can do to get off, like, cause I'm going to. Only, what do you want me to have? Do you want me to be riddled with guilt and shame, and fear? Or do you want it to be, man, this is
beautiful and spiritual?
Like, our hormones are the most alive, and here we are trying to prevent ourselves from enjoying it. It could be the best sex of our life as teenagers, but we're so, don't do it. It's just, well, anyways, that's not really talking about spirituality. That's just been my first impact, was a lot of fear, guilt, and shame and danger, and yet horny as hell. And none of it made sense. I just did not, there was no sense of truth in it. And when I was 17, 18 years old, and I got the book, Tantra, The Art of Conscious Loving, after the first love of my life broke up with me, I was gobsmacked. I couldn't believe that this stuff we were doing, the crazy ass orgasmic, holy shit things we were doing, were things he learned in a book. Cause I really felt like I was having a spiritual experience. I remember like floating up and out of my body and looking down at this lovemaking.
Wow.
And feeling such a connection of like union, and really it was so psychedelic.
Wow.
I was on acid. It was how it felt.
I love that. So you had that early on in your sexual experience. That's unusual. Most people don't get that till much, much later in their journey. So
I think I just needed the healing so much.
Yeah. So how old were you? What was your first boyfriend age?
Well, the first boy that I fell in love with, I was a senior in high school, and he was like a 32 bongo drummer in a hippie band.
Oh my God. Of course he was. Leah Piper. I love it. That's hilarious. Wait, is he the one who gave you the book?
He's yes. Okay. When he left all of his books with me, and that was one of the books.
See, that is the beauty of going toward older men when you're a younger girl.
Yeah.
You just also need to, be cognizant of your cycle and getting pregnant and all that stuff. But yeah, mine came around 19. I was with somebody for the first time who I was like, why isn't he coming? Why isn't he having an orgasm? I don't understand. And so I finally asked him, he's like, oh, I'm practicing non-ejaculatory method. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And he gave me a book. So I also was young, not quite as young as you,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And he got me into the Tao. And actually we ended up going to acupuncture school together years after that. Like we went our separate ways for probably about 7 or 8, 9 years, and then ended up at the same, 5 branches university, got our master's there. So how funny is that? But I attracted 3 different men who were practitioners of non-ejaculatory Taoist practice. And so that's really what got me into it. And I was just so curious about this. And I traveled to Asia and I read all Montauk Chia's books. And I sat with Montauk Chia and a bunch of other Taoist masters around the world. And just really started to study. Probably my big peak curiosity and interest in all of this was the health aspect of it and the manifestation power that lies behind it. So, when we were talking about spiritual sex, I mean, we could go in a million different directions.
I know, so many places to visit.
You could use it for manifestation. You can use it for health. You can use it for intimacy, for healing the traumas that you experienced when you were a child. So how would you define, let's just define it, each of us. Give me your definition, love.
I think it's what spiritual sex is. It's the mystical experience of love, of sexual, spiritual love, deeply emotionally, sexually, and spiritually loved to your core. That is a unique experience of love. And it requires a full, open, naked, vulnerable body on every level, all chakras firing.
I love it. That's a pretty great definition. Yeah. I would just add to that. I mean, I'm just going to tack on. I'm not going to change a word of that, but basically I think it's, it's a new level of intimacy. Really all anyone wants in their life is to be seen and acknowledged. What do we hear all the time from our couples? He doesn't see me. She doesn't understand me. It's like, so intimacy, bringing intimacy to a level of higher consciousness is how I see spiritual sex. And intimacy is made up of trust. So being able to trust yourself first and foremost, because if you don't trust yourself, you're never going to trust the other person. But then you need to be able to trust the other person. And that's missing in so many couples that I work with. Trust. Then vulnerability, because if you trust someone, it's much easier to be naked and vulnerable and let all the parts of yourself that you have been hiding away a lot of your life come to the table. So trust, vulnerability, and presence. When we can bring those three things together, then we're in a deep state of intimacy. And when we can use that intimacy to create a higher level of consciousness in our whole lives, I think that's the beauty of what spiritual sex can bring to your life.
Yeah, I think some of the mistakes that I believe people make in intimacy is thinking that in order to trust someone, they have to know all these things about them.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I have to know this, that, they have to prove this, that. Like, people withhold trust and intimacy in a very interesting way, is if withholding it will somehow make them safer.
Right.
And my experience in having studied Tantra in the school that I did, one of the first teachings you get is, can you see God in this person? And no matter who they are, you don't have to be attracted to them. Right. And so once I realized that if I look for the divine in that person, they become completely desirable, and physical attraction is like way, way, way in the background. There's something about connecting to somebody's soul that opens up the door to intimacy. And like, trust is a choice, and it's a door that opens on your side.
That's right.
And when you trust yourself, you trust in the wisdom of your felt sense. You're not going to go someplace that's going to hurt you.
It's exactly right.
It's really hard to perpetrate against somebody who's powerful. How they hold themselves, how they carry themselves, how they respect themselves. Perpetrators are looking for people who don't have that.
Right.
Because they're easier to prey on. They're not going to be successful with someone who's done their work and like is super, super clean about their worth. They're not walking down the street with their head down to the ground. They're walking with their shoulders back. And there's a connection to that and deep, profound sex, because you have to care for yourself to experience the care that someone wants to give to you. I can have really epic, amazing spiritual sex with what's it called? A stranger. That's what they're called. But they don't feel like a stranger, do they? When you look into their eyes and there is like, holy shit, who are you? Wow, you're amazing. And so there is a skill of seeing the divine in someone, whether you are dating or whether you are with the same person for 25 years.
Absolutely.
If you can see the divine in them, then it is a privilege to spend 10 minutes, a half hour, 2 hours all night making love to them, because who you're making love to is God or goddess, or some androgynous in between.
Yeah.
But whatever turns you on, baby.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, that is the trick. That is where the magic lies, and where that trust builds inside of you is it's the reflection that you see in someone else's eyes that's coming from inside of you. You are creating all of what is coming to you. So it doesn't really matter who you're looking into these eyes and into the soul of, if you're coming from that place of divine love, universal love. And so with spiritual sexuality, there's an opportunity for both people, regardless of where they're at on that journey, to go even further, to go even deeper. And I think that's one of the things that feels to me so addicting about it, or so exciting and inspiring about spiritual sexuality, is every single time you get to expand and evolve even more. And whether it involves sexual intercourse or not is completely irrelevant. Whether it involves an orgasm is completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
What's relevant is the presence that you bring to the table with that person, and the seeing of them, the seeing of their soul. It is so medicinal. These types of sexual experiences can leave a human being reeling for a week and a half, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like for
a lifetime.
A lifetime.
Have I remembered some past experiences? They will be with me I revisit them. I savor them. I bask in afternoons of delight.
Yeah.
Blessings to all those out there.
Yeah. And after one of those experiences, don't you feel lighter? Like nothing could go, like anything that was incongruent inside of your body, or disorganized or diseased, is the complete opposite, right?
Yeah. I forget how Charles used to describe it, but it was like you have these experiences and they give you a pearl, and you like make this necklace of pearls over a lifetime of these like exquisite experiences of deep love, of deep meeting of bodies and minds and hearts. And you actually transcend the body, yet you're still in the body. It's this really mystical cosmic experience of being so alive in the body that you actually go beyond it, but you're not abandoning it. It's and there are times when like the pleasure is so stupefying. It can be so like cymbals crashing and making the most incredible orgasmic sound, and your body's reverberating just like cymbals do when you smash them together. And those are just so unique, and it comes with a certain chemistry that you have with someone else, but it's an ability to see beyond their personality. It's an ability to just allow this magical electrical thing called our body have its way with each other. Yeah. And I'm in a marriage now that's monogamous and long-term, and I can't say that those experiences like I just described with the symbols, that's not something that it happens every week. It doesn't even happen every month. There's a different, sweeter type of lovemaking that's not quite as earth-shaking as some of those first spiritual experiences when you're first getting to know someone and they're so cosmic. There is something that transcends. At least it's transcending in my life right now. And I'm sure that it's going to continue to evolve and shift and change, because we're two creative, committed people. And we're interested in seeking what's new, what's different. And we're also happy being cozy and comfortable. And so there's all sorts of different types of sex. The spiritual lovemaking and sex is just one of the sweet ones, but so is a quickie. It's not to say that like you should only have spiritual sex. Right. It's just to say that if you've never had it, you're missing the boat. You're missing something that all bodies deserve to step into. And it
Absolutely.
doesn't have to be religious. I think some people get confused between like spiritual and religious.
Yeah.
We could even throw out those two words and just call it mystical.
Mystical sex. I'm
Yeah.
liking that. Yeah. And the reality is when you have these like mystical sexual experiences, they then feed the quickies, right? The quickies become
Yes.
totally different after that. It's a way of nourishing, like adding to your sexual repertoire, your sexual cauldron of what's possible, even when you're, having a quickie or a comfy or
Oh, comfy. Yeah, that's
any
cute.
any
Or
of
lazy.
a lazy, yeah, any of these other styles of sex.
Yeah. I think also what's interesting, distinction regarding spiritual or mystical sex is it tends to be slower.
Yeah.
Not to say that there aren't like, big hot friction, escalated waves of like major pounding.
Because that happens in that too.
Yeah, there's a place for that, baby. But I really love and appreciate, one of the things I think I most treasure is the languid. It's the slow, it's the stretched out, it's the feast. It's not fast food. We're going to sit down, we're going to feast,
Yeah.
And I think that's also another piece that makes it different than other types of sex.
Yeah. The time that you take with it. Usually these spiritual sexual encounters are much longer. They're not usually quickies. They can last up to 4 hours is my usual max. My usual min is like 2 hours. So because you can get lost and you're not even, again, necessarily having intercourse at all or the whole time, but rather you are exploring just every little intricate detail of this person on every single level, a spiritual, a physical, a psychological, and an emotional level. And to be seen on all 4 accounts of what it means to be a human being that deeply by another human being is so delightful. It's so delightful. So for our listeners, like what would we give them? Like, how would we direct them and guide them into one of these types of sexual experiences, especially if they've been in a marriage for a long time or they've never had anything like this? And, doing something totally different might make the other person feel inadequate in some way.
I think there's a lot of components that you can add, because I think for a lot of people, especially those that have been in a relationship for a long time, sex has turned into a habit. And one of the things you want to consider is, what's the difference between a habit and a ritual? Because you can take a habit and ritualize it. And what that does is it makes it special. So for instance, we all have dinner every night, but when you set the table with a tablecloth and you've got cloth napkins and you light candles and you dim the lights and you put on some dinner music, maybe you say grace, now you've got a ritual. Another example of habit versus ritual would be, we all brush our teeth in the morning. So sometimes I'll put the toothpaste on Matt's brush and just leave it by the sink.
Oh, that is so sweet.
Yeah. And then he'll do it for me in the night. It's like this. And we're so, giddy. We're like, oh, flirty. We feel like kids again. It's so cute. And your voice gets really high. And you kind of talk like a baby to each other because you're so cute. And that is taking something that's a habit and turning it into something special.
Yeah.
So when you think about sex, same thing applies to sex. If you want to make it special, light the candles, dim the lights, take a sarong and throw it over the mess. Make the space beatific. Warm up the massage oil and the lubricant. Put a towel on the sheet. Start with an intention. And one of the prayers that we often say in Tantra is, I invoke and evoke God, Goddess united in oneness, so that this be a prayer of our love, so that we may know God, and so God may know us through our lovemaking. And so you treat the actual lovemaking as if it were a prayer to your God, physical prayer to your God. And so when you invoke, you call the spirit of your spiritual values, whatever you call spirit that resonates with you, you call that inside of you, you invoke it. so that it is inside, and that it's also inside of your partner. And then you evoke that present into the space, into the room, so that this divine energy is inside of you and also inside the room and inside your partner, so that you may know God and so God may know you. So your partner becomes God and you become God. And through this experience, you get to know what the divine really is. Because from a more non-dualistic perspective, it's there anyways.
That's right.
And so I think in lovemaking, it's a good reminder. That's why I love that prayer so much.
It's a beautiful prayer.
It reminds us who we really are anyways. And sometimes we just need to say that out loud. So having an intention, right? And you don't have to use that one. You would just say, hey, babe, what do you want to release from your life that no longer serves you? Name it. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, babe, what do you want to bring into your life that you would like more of? Let's call it. Boom. And give your lovemaking some power. Send it out to the universe. Universe, you have a job. Take this love and do something beautiful with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's enough to set the tone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's more than enough to set the tone, you know, and it's really is like setting the environment up, setting the space up, you know, with candles and music and scents and lighting and all of that. And then having this intention, like just doing that, and then starting to go through the motions of, you know, how you guys know how to have sex together, like just going through that. And then at some point, you're going to get carried over this threshold where you enter what Sherry Winston calls the trance state, what I call the yin field. What do you call it, Leah?
I don't know that I've named it. I think for me, it's that high peak state of arousal where you're suspended. Maybe I'll call it the suspended state.
Ooh, the suspended state. I love that. And so in that state, you're no longer doing, you're no longer in control. It's like then something else is moving through your body.
Anyone else getting horny?
I am, yes. It feels so damn good. Like I can feel my hairs are standing up on end.
Yeah.
You know, it's so delicious and so delightful to let go and to surrender all of the, it has to be this way. And I've only ever done this before. I've only ever had an orgasm in this way before. And I've only ever had sex in that way before. And so if I do something else, it might mean I'm a slut. It might mean I'm all those fears, all those shames, all those guilt.
Worries. What about having an orgasm?
Yeah. You just let all of that go and you let this other force move through you. It's very, very deep and powerful. If sex does become a part of your spiritual practice, like intercourse sex, up and inside, close up to a woman's cervix, think about that as like the temple. Like then you have entered the temple. You have gone into this other realm, this mystical spiritual realm where this holy house of the goddess lives. And it's a wonderful place for a man to worship. It's a wonderful place for a woman to worship. It's a wonderful place for anyone to offer their prayer. What are you praying for? Are you praying for your mother or father because they're dying of cancer? Are you praying for your niece or nephew because they're, hooked on drugs? What are you praying for in your life? Are you praying for a miracle of money to come through so you can purchase your home before it sells on the market? What are you praying for? How do you want to bring that into your lovemaking? Because lovemaking, sexuality is what creates new life. It creates a whole new human being, right? It has that potential. So it's the most potent creative life force energy that we have access to. So how do you want to use your prayer to create the world around you?
Yeah, in fact, there's a whole system of what's referred to as sex magic within the Tantric, various Tantric methods that really helps you with manifesting one of two things, either of a secular nature or of a spiritual nature. What are the qualities that you need to enhance your own sainthood? Patience, hope, faith, trust, vulnerability. There's all sorts of things that we can use sex and prayer to bring into yourself, more qualities that are going to make your life more beatific. And then there's things within the whole manifestation realm that are secular in nature, like buying a new house or getting a new car, or getting a new job, or finding an answer. Where's my love of my life? You know, there's all sorts of ways to play with manifestation. We'll do a whole episode on that. I think what has made sex so spiritual for me is the healing aspect of it.
I
Like
love the healing.
the miraculous change in belief systems, the miraculous change in limiting belief systems. What has been the most transformative is transforming self-loathing into self-love.
So
You
powerful.
know, which has a strong connection to self-trust versus self-doubt.
Right.
There's many pieces to that puzzle. And so once you come face to face with how you talk to yourself in your own private dark moments, and you recognize, I don't like that voice. That's not a kind voice in my mind that is hurting me. That to me, when I couldn't deny that voice and its volume any longer. And I knew I had to do something, otherwise something bad was going to happen to me. It was really a life or death. Felt like a life or death line. And I had no idea that it was going to be sexuality that saved me. You know, the place for healing was deep inside of me. And so being a woman with a female assigned genitals, there is that womb space. There is the universe. There is this experience of a chakra that you can touch the center of, which is so beautiful because we can't touch the center of all the chakras. And when you were talking about, you know, that house, that temple, right, inside of the yoni, the temple that needed the most reverence in my body, yes, it was my yoni, but more so was my root chakra.
Yeah.
Because it was the root, that was what was shrouded in darkness. And again, the root chakra, the anal cavity, there's all this pleasure and anal play. And where so many of us are so terrified of it. We think it's going to be gross. You know, we have maybe homophobic fear, like whatever our story is. This is going to be a channel that we hope to normalize what is possible regarding anal pleasure. I needed a tremendous amount of healing in both places. But again, 2 chakras you get to touch the center of. Hallelujah.
Amazing. And they are both the chakras that connect you to being an earthling, being in a body, right? And so I'm sure on your journey, Leah, that through that healing, you became more embodied. You began to enjoy your body more and see yourself as beautiful. I've heard you say this before, so I know it's true.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful. So for you, it was this psychological healing and this physical healing all at the same time.
So those 2 primal chakras were incongruent with this other spiritual higher place. And it wasn't until those 2 pieces met each other and I could really tie the threads together that my wholeness emerged. So yes, it was like fully coming into my body. And yes, it was fully healing and making peace that I was a sexual woman, despite my fear of being that kind of girl. But most importantly, it was the union between heaven and earth in me, that the 2 have a place to dance and make love. And I don't got to wait to die to go and experience it.
Yeah, so beautiful, so super powerful. The medicine of sexuality really does open up these chakras. And as Leah's saying, these 2 lower ones, like you can actually go into and like physically touch. You can touch the cervix, you can touch the root chakra, and it opens up this whole line of energy inside of your body that all your other chakras are connected to. And your chakras are the energetic mirror of your glands, and your glands are your endocrine system. And we all know that hormones make you feel a lot of different emotions. And when you use sexuality to heal these chakras, these glands, and open up this whole central column of light inside of your body, I love that description you had of how they met and you became more whole than ever before. That is absolutely available to anyone who's walking around in a body.
Yeah. And in fact, I think we forget that yes, there is a feeling of being more whole. But I think what's even more true, the realization that I had is that I was always whole. I just forgot.
That's it.
You know, it's more like I thought I was so broken, but I
Right.
wasn't. You know,
Love
I
that.
thought my innocence was taken from me, but guess what? It's still here. I just needed to uncover it. So I think people think that something gets lost along the way. No, honey, it's not lost. It just gets covered up. And so it's a remembering.
That's right. Yeah. Bringing these parts of yourself back into yourself, into your wholeness. That is the dismembering has been happening for eons, right? It's been going on of like, you can be pretty, but you can't be smart. You can look this way, but you can't do that. And so we have been pulled apart and been, made to be one way, but not the other. And that's a dismembering. So now with tantric practice, with Taoist sexual practices, you get the opportunity to remember.
Yeah, I love that.
My experience with healing through spiritual sexuality was a little different. It was because I used to have, mine was more physical. It was like more of a physical into the psychosomatic, spiritual, emotional side. I had horrific periods, like the kind where you would miss 3 or 4 days of school and you'd be rolling around on the floor and writhing in pain and popping ibuprofen all day long and like barfing. Like it was really bad, really, really bad. And had been checked for endometriosis. That wasn't it. It wasn't all these, it was all these things that it wasn't. It was just this stagnation in my body. Looking back on it now, I really, truly believe it's because of the oppression of my creative energy. Like it never got a seat at the table. My creative life force energy was just like, just don't look at it. Don't pay attention to it. It's not really there, And so that coagulated and stagnated the chi in my body, which coagulated and stagnated the blood in my body, which is what cramps are. Coagulated and stagnate blood. I went through all the physical healing, the Chinese medicine, the acupuncture, the herbs, everything under the sun I did. And it wasn't until, and it got better, layers peeled away, but it wasn't until I started doing the Taoist sexual practices that it completely was eradicated. I mean, now my periods are smooth and easy. When you have a period, the blood should be coming out like water. There should not be clots. It should not be dark. It should be bright red and coming out like water. And for most women, they're like, well, I've never had a period like that, So there was something so healing about doing those Taoist sexual practices on my own. So that's really more in the vein of white tantra, doing the practices on your own and moving that energy through your body on your own and cleaning up these pathways, these meridian systems, these chakra systems in your body. That was the healing experience that I had, which then, of course, the physical body is the other side of the coin to this emotional, psychological side of your body. And that's when things started to shift for me to come into that more wholeness. All those layers got peeled away. And then there I was, just really more confident than I'd ever been before, more willing to let my authentic truth be seen and heard than ever before without fear of judgment. So I got to a point where I'm like, well, this is just what it is, And at that point, you start to attract people who like what is true about you, and you're not having to, continue to hide these parts of you that are false because you want someone to like you. That's a backwards way of going about it. So, the healing journey of spiritual sexuality can go lots of different ways.
And people love this conversation too. How wonderful. There are also people who are extremely uncomfortable, and you can feel that. What can somebody receive? What is kind? What it hurts yourself when you overexpose something because someone can't hear it. And so I had to learn that it wasn't that someone couldn't receive all of me. It was just that all of me can be very intimidating.
Leah's a lot. I'll tell you now.
I'm a big jar of cookies. So, I if I don't want to be rejected either,
Right.
So there's a really elegant, beautiful learning of measurement, of knowing how much is too much.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, when you start to get into spiritual sexuality, that's naturally going to occur. Like, don't
Mhm.
worry about having to figure that out.
Mm.
There definitely are skills and methods, but it also is very organic and naturally occurring. And you'll make mistakes along the way. You absolutely will
Yeah, it's the
put your
way
foot
to
in your
learn.
mouth. You'll walk away from a conversation and be like, oh boy, did I share too much?
Right. That was a
Was
bit of an overshare,
was
wasn't
I
it?
the slut of that party or what? I don't know.
Oh my
You'll learn,
God.
you'll walk away, and you'll find that place of discernment inside of you, that same place that holds your authentic truth. And if you go away from a conversation with a group of people really feeling shame and guilt around what you shared, then that might be your body telling you that's not your group of people.
Oh yeah.
Whereas if you walk away from a different group of people having said the exact same thing, feeling like, oh my God, it was so amazing to be received and to be able to have this conversation about what I'm going through and what's evolving inside of me in relationship to sexuality and spirituality, and feeling uplifted, then that's your group of people. So your discernment factor will get stronger.
Yeah. And the only way to know that is to have experiences of it. And you'll delight when there's no boundaries to what you can share, because who you're speaking with is right there with you.
Yeah,
And
that's the
and then
best.
and then you can also stop judging the people that can't go there with you.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to hurt anymore. You can actually just love them right where they're at.
Yep.
I think one of the big spiritual teachings I had to come to terms with in this work is I was so alive with what was changing and healing and opening in me. I thought everyone was supposed to have this.
Right.
I was convinced if only everyone had this.
She
My
was a born
God,
again
think
tantrika.
of the world we could live in. Totally born again tantrika. And that's not true. It's not for everybody.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And you might go through that phase too, and it's okay if you do, where you're like,
Yeah.
everyone needs to know about the
Everybody.
amazing healing power of sexuality
Yeah.
and spirituality.
Not everyone's going to benefit from it. It's not for
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, share your experience with those who you feel aligned with, and it might open up a doorway or a portal for them as well. What are some components? Like when you're having a deep spiritual sexual experience, one of the things that comes up a lot is there's these long pauses, like these long moments of stillness. There's so much juice in those moments. Like there's so much depth of connection, no movement, no gyrating, no pumping, no humping is needed. It's just being in that moment of stillness. And you can hang out in that moment for a long time.
Most people have never truly visited stillness in sex. And the amount of intimacy and cosmic
Oh, it's so
circuitry
good.
that is possible in stillness is so powerful.
It's delightful. Those are the moments where you're like, this isn't even really sex. This isn't even really intimacy. I don't know what this is, but it is divine. It's divinity coming through you. And so there's stillness, there's slowness, there's also fast pace inside of spiritual sexuality. The energy is having its way with you.
Yeah.
It's taking over. Positions that you've never gotten into before are going to happen. Things that you've never done before, but you're feeling totally safe and totally comfortable to explore them. That's really what this container and this experience sets up for you.
That reminds me, one of the things that's a really beautiful phenomenon, if you are a yogi, if you've practiced, have an asana practice, you will start to see how much asana is played out in sex.
Oh,
There are incredible, our bodies are like these sacred geometry formations that can happen in lovemaking. And when you bring certain yoga postures into the lovemaking, I've got a video called The Love Dance, and it totally shows the application of how the white tantra, the yoga asana practice, coincides with the red tantra, the sexual lovemaking. If you rate this episode and you leave a comment, Leah, I want the love dance, I'll make sure we reach out and get it to you. So let that be an incentive. If you want to see how yoga and sex come together, baby, I got you covered.
Oh my God. It's so true. They really do. And then, Thai massage, if you've ever had Thai massage, that can come into play as well, or jujitsu or any kind of martial arts. If you have the divine pleasure of being with a lover who has any kind of massage skill, yoga skill, jujitsu, any kind of that kind of skill, then that is going to weave its way into your session as well. Breath is going to start taking over your body. Sounds are going to start to come out of you that you have never made before. And at first, when you start to make sounds you've never made before, you can get a little bit like, oh, I don't know, should I make that sound? Does that sound weird? Does that, you start to self-judge and wonder if the other person's judging you?
Insecure, yeah.
But again, you cross this threshold and you're like, can't even hear myself. Doesn't matter. Just got to make these sounds in order to make this pleasure roll through my body the way that it wants to roll through.
Yeah, that reminds me of it. We've sort of touched on it already. That idea of that, like, love making is a prayer with your body. Meditation, again, there's like sex can be a meditation too. If prayer isn't your word, but you get meditation. Let this lovemaking be a moving meditation. Let yourself have an experience where you're separating the roles of giver and receiver. When you have enough practice separating receiving and giving, something phenomenal happens in sex when you're both doing things at the same time, is that your awareness for subtlety in sensation grows exponentially, which means your cultivation of pleasure expands in a way that you cannot now imagine because you've not tried it yet.
Right.
As you begin to separate those roles, and your job as the receiver to simply meditate on sensation and what you're feeling, your awareness for these different levels of pleasure expands. When you know your job is just to be the giver, your awareness to the sensation and to the pleasure that you can absorb through your touch, through your giving, through your licking and your sucking and your beingness, that expands your pleasure potential tenfold. But it's not just the pleasure that expands, your awareness of how you perceive the world as spirit. And, it's not just that your body is housing the spirit, your body is spirit. It's just slower moving, denser spirit. And so all these things start to come together, but it requires a quiet mind to be able to sit still, to have that you prepare your nervous system to be able to stay focused, to feel all the things that need to be felt, even if something uncomfortable arises.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I love that you said that, because right now in my life, currently, I have got about 8 humongous projects going on all at once. So homegirl's mind over here is not so quiet. It's like I sit down to meditate and I just sit there and think, whatever.
The list, right?
That's okay. I'm okay with that. That's what needs to happen. But when I have these tantric intimacy dates, that's when I get to go into the stillness of my mind. That's when I get to go into total presence with another soul, and that other soul bringing a high level of presence to my plate, to my temple. It really just creates this beautiful field and this beautiful opportunity for me to drop into that deeper stillness of the mind, that meditative state. This is where I'm getting the best meditation right now.
And what else are you getting? What are the things that people don't know are the added benefits?
Right. Yeah. So this is what Leah is talking about. It's like, you can't even imagine, right? So we want to really help you imagine what's possible. Yeah. That's what we're trying here. And right now, what's happening for me is beyond sex. It's beyond intimacy. It's like intergalactic interstitial space. Like both of us are practitioners of the body, of the human body. So we both know the meridian systems and the acupuncture points and the psychological and spiritual connection between all of what it means to be in a human body. And so what I'm walking away with is just this complete fucking renewal. Like it is an absolute reset to my entire system, my entire body. It makes me emotional. I can feel the emotion coming up, you know. It's just so deep and so powerful. And that place where lingam and cervix are just like they're just kissing, you know, they're just in the deepest connection with each other. That's church. That's the moment where it's like nothing else. This is all that matters. This is all that matters. All the other minutia and shit that I have to deal with in my life, it's gone. It's not even there. And then when I return to my 5 million billion amazing things that I'm transitioning through right now, I'm just so much more relaxed and in such a deeper state of trust around all of it. So it's making the big transformation that I'm going through in my life so much more pleasurable, enjoyable, and easy. And it's allowing me to feel more grace through it all.
You know, it's one of my favorite Tantra sutras, you know, refers to that pleasure is this gift from spirit, because the human soul gets weary, because the path of life can be so difficult. We have so many reasons to feel anxious and depressed and upset. And yet here's pleasure to renew the weary soul. And so I'm just like, imagining you coming to bed with your soul renewed and you having respite from that busy thinking, problem solving mind, you know, that's just got the list that never ends. And it's beautiful.
Oh, I'm so grateful for it. It's a game changer right now, because otherwise I would probably be lost in some serious depression. I would probably be lost in a lot of stress for sure. And I would not have the state of trust that I have. I mean, that's one of the things that we've been exploring is like, what are you embodying? So for intention setting for these sessions that we've been having, you know, mine has been trust. I'm embodying that. And so to embody trust and to go through a tantric experience with somebody, it's otherworldly. It's really, you said earlier, psychedelic. It is. And the partner I'm practicing with right now looked at me, paused, went into a moment of stillness, looked at me and said, being with you is being on psychedelics.
Yeah, it's trippy, man.
And I said, yes. Yes, it is. And
it is.
Sober as a stone, you know? Yeah. So it's in it. There's the chemicals inside of your body, back to my practitioner mind, the oxytocin and the
dopamine and testosterone and opioids.
All of those hormones. I can't even thank you.
Yes.
They just flood. And that's what causes that sort of psychedelic feeling of well-being, not transcending the body, but also being so present and in the body at the same time.
You know, I've always looked up to these friends of mine. In fact, one of them I did my teacher trainings with, and they've been married for 30 plus years. And every Sunday, everyone knows, don't call Cheryl or Earl until 3:00 on Sunday, because they're at church, honey. They're not picking up the phone. And church is their bedroom. They bring all their snacks inside and they make love until 3:00 in the afternoon, and making love to them. Yeah, sometimes it's intercourse, sometimes it's sacred spot massage, usually includes a bath, and feeding each other finger food and being in each other's delightful, undivided attention. And I love that, like, everyone in their life knows. The kids know, the best friends know, the parents know, they're at church. Nobody's picking up the phone. And I think we have lost touch with some of that devotional time. There's a word in Sanskrit, and it's the word bhakti, and bhakti means devotion, bhakti yoga, devotional union. And this is why I think these ancient art forms have so much meaning for us today, is because we don't have a representation of this in our own modern culture. I think the reason why this like Eastern spiritual practice spoke to my heart is because growing up in my Christian upbringing, and I converted to Catholicism at 11 years old. I got baptized into Catholicism, had to go to Catholic school after all that Pentecostal stuff, born again Christian stuff. So the departure of going, well, who are my role models of love? Two virgins, Jesus, who I was raised believing was a virgin, and Mother Mary was definitely a virgin, but yet she was married. No, it turns out she did have some more kids. You know, it was so confusing. We don't have a model for sexual, spiritual love. And they do in the East. And there was a homecoming there for my sweet little Christian heart that just needed somebody to look up to.
I love that. Yeah.
I go Southern every time. Don't mind me.
She does. She goes Southern.
I have a
She
weird
put a
Southern
couple
alter
drinks
ego.
in her. And
Oh my God, it is something else. And I'm not from the South.
At all.
But spiritually I am. All right.
All right. It's that Southern Pentecostal girl in you.
Yep. Well, this was fun. Thanks for dishing on
Spiritual sex. Yeah, we'd
Yeah.
love to hear any questions you have about your own journey, how to get started, if you're already on it, you know, what's coming up for you. We'd love to hear. We'd love to support you and just kind of have a conversation with you about what's transpiring inside of your sexual spiritual union inside of yourself and potentially inside of a relationship. And it will also inspire us to bring more of that to the podcast. So.
Yeah, I would love to know if you would be interested in sort of the anatomy of a sexual spiritual date night, where we could kind of take you through some steps, like 10 steps to a full experience, things that you could bring to the table and sort of have a roadmap for.
Awesome. And we will look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks for tuning in. If the hosts seem to know what they were talking about, that's because they do. Leah Piper is a Tantric sex master coach and a positive psychology facilitator. Dr. Willow Brown is both a Chinese and functional medicine doctor and a toaist sexology teacher. Don't forget, your comments, likes, subscribes, and suggestions matter. Let's realize this new world together.